what we actually mean by cross-border. So Lauren, I'm going to go back to you for this. Like, what do we mean by that when we're talking about cross-border?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a payment sense, we've largely defined that over many years. It's when the payer and the payee are in separate countries, and never the two shall meet, to use Simon's words. But I think it gets a bit more opaque when we start to talk about open banking. In conversations we've had for some, it's where the data user, the customer, and their kind of provider, if you like, their TPP is in another country. For others, it's when the TPP and the bank are in another country. So I think we already still haven't created a set of definitions around what we really mean by cross-border data sharing. I think we're starting to solidify around the view that it's where the bank and the TPP are in different countries. But I think, cross-border also doesn't necessarily need to mean every country to every country and opening up access, at a global level. As we've seen kind of primarily in the instant payment space, cross-border initiatives have tended to focus on where there are strong trade corridors or where it makes sense from a volume or a value perspective, where there have been existing like monetary or political unions. So, for example, obviously the EU being the classic one, but when you talk about the ASEAN market or the Pacific Alliance, other countries that have clubbed together, if you like, to create a union where there is, like I say, strong transaction volume. And I kind of see that making sense a lot in the open banking space. So I don't think necessarily when we talk about cross-border, we should automatically assume it's every country in the world, every citizen of those countries is sharing data with every other country. I think it's more probably you'll see regional pockets of activity taking shape.
Interesting. So David, I'm going to bring you back in the conversation. It seems weird asking MasterCard what cross-border is, but in terms of the context of open banking, I mean, how would you define it?
Yeah, no, I agree with Lauren. I think there's two ways we think about it. I think there is very much this area around cross-border, that the transaction is cross-border, whether it be a payment or a data flow, in terms of I'm in one market and the supplier is another market. So I think we absolutely see that. That's kind of one version of it. I think the other version that we have is what we see from a kind of a provider perspective is that they want to operate in multiple markets, and therefore the ability to operate across borders. The individual transactions may be domestic, staying within a market, but as a company, I want to operate in France and Spain and the UK and the US, and I want to be able to operate in each of those in a similar way as possible. And I think that's kind of the other way in terms of when we think about cross-border, as well as in the traditional cross-border payment sense, that's kind of the open banking lens that we would bring.
I'm going to stay with you here for the next question. I mean, should we be thinking beyond standards? Like what else should we be looking at?
Yeah, no, I risk, having seen Helen's sort of entry to sort of set Lauren up for this question, I risk stealing her thunder. But I think
I'll go to Lauren next. Don't worry.
That's all right. We'll get there. So I think one thing is that standards are very important. I think technical standards, the starting point is getting a core level of technical standards that the industry has bought into is the baseline for interoperability. So technical standards are absolutely key. But then on top of that, I think in terms to get true interoperability, you have to think more broadly. It is about things like having commonality in terms of legal terms and the laws that are associated with the transaction. I think you've got to think about how disputes are handled and how you would handle disputes. I think you've got to think about common commercial models as well. How can you create a commercial model that works across multiple markets? And think about how liability works as well. And kind of, if things go wrong, who's there? So to make true interoperability, you've got to layer on more than just can they technically talk to each other, which is vitally important. But to get a true interoperable market, you need to think about some of those other factors as well.